I had a panic attack. That's right, a panic attack. What caused it? Well, I'm excited to announce that my brand new book, Leading with Vulnerability, is coming out October 3rd. And that's right, that's the book that caused me to have a panic attack. It happened shortly after I signed the contract for writing that book. That's how difficult, that's how foreign of a topic this is to me, somebody who does not embrace and practice vulnerability. You might be somebody like that. Your leaders might be like that. But I'm excited to announce that it's done, it's over. You can now pre-order your copy, which is based on over 100 CEO interviews and a survey of 14,000 employees, which looks at the very simple concept that vulnerability for leaders is not the same as it is for everybody else. Why is that? Well, to find out, and if you want to learn from these 100 CEOs that I interviewed, the 14,000 employees that I surveyed, head to leadwithvulnerability.com. You can pre-order your copy and get access to some really cool bonuses. Find out why this book gave me a panic attack so that you don't have one.
Empathy is not only the basis of our species. We got to understand what people want, and if you can solve that, they're going to trade you something for it.
My guest today, David Rogier. He is the founder and CEO of MasterClass. Why is that important? How does empathy play a role in what you do as a leader?
In a creative field, and when we're working with our instructors and trying to get their craft and their mastery out of them, you try as hard as you can to understand everything about them and how they think and how they process. And then our users, we try to understand what they actually want, what they actually need. And then employees and executives, the same thing. It is very difficult to be successful in business without being good at empathizing.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Great Leadership. My guest today, David Rogier. He is the founder and CEO of MasterClass. David, thank you for joining me.
Honor to be here.
So I was joking around. People don't know this, right? Before I hit record, I said I was going to start this episode by saying, I'm Jacob Morgan. Welcome to my MasterClass. And David was like, oh, I'll be sending you a cease and desist letter.
That was like an 80% joke.
Yeah. 20% serious, 80% joke. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I've been following MasterClass for years just to kind of see the evolution of the company, the types of people that you've been bringing in to offer the various courses. But I'm sure a lot of people out there are perhaps not familiar with MasterClass. So can you share a little bit about the company? What do you guys do? And who are some of the big names that you have on the platform?
Yeah. I mean, the idea was, I think we all love to learn, but we don't always love school. And Jacob, I don't know if you still have this, but I still get bad dreams that like I'm a credit short of finishing school.
I have nightmares.
I am like, yeah, same.
I 100% have nightmares where, very similar to that, where I'm about to graduate and then I realize that like I forgot to do a class or credit, or I failed something and I can't get into college and I'm not going to get a job. And then I wake up, I'm like, what the hell? It's freaky.
Yeah. And okay, so my idea was, can we build a school that is for the rest of your life? Because I think we love to learn, but I think school scares us, and for some of us has really bad term effects. It really has really bad effects. And so if you think about creating a school that is for the rest of your life, you start thinking of some things. One, you start thinking of, hey, the rate of change is actually increasing in the world. So when I think of my mom and dad, things they learned in school will last them for their entire life. That's no longer the case.
Yeah.
And that rate of change is increasing even further. The other part you start thinking about is if school for the rest of your life, the one big difference between that and the school you had for the first 18 years of your life is for the first 18 years, you by law have to have your butt in that seat.
Yep.
So all of a sudden for the school for the rest of your life, it's got to be one that you want to go to. So the idea was, can we make it possible to build a school that is for the rest of your life that you learn and that you actually want to go to? And so what we do is we pick the best in the world, and we have them not only share the biggest lessons in their own life, and not only what their crafts are, but how they see the world and how you can apply that into your own life. And so this is everybody from Steph Curry, the basketball player, to Richard Branson, to a class from Shonda Rhimes.
Yeah. My brother
Yeah.
took one with
So it's
Gordon
yeah.
Ramsay. I'm a big
Gordon
fan of chess.
Ramsay,
You got Gary Kasparov on there. I think Serena Williams had a class on there, if I'm not mistaken, for
Serena
tennis.
Williams is on there.
Uh, and yeah, I mean everybody. It's really mind blowing the caliber of people who you've been able to bring onto the platform. Can you share a little bit about where the idea came from? Because from what I read online, it was something I believe with your mom or your grandmother, right? That and you
Yeah.
saw how they were kind of dealing with the education
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. I was working in venture capital and in Bay Area. I thought it was going to be a lot like Shark Tank, and it wasn't. I don't think I was really good at it. I don't think I really enjoyed it. And I went to my boss and I said, "Thanks so much, but I want to go start something." And he asked me what, and I said, "I'm not sure yet." And he's like, "Why don't you pitch me?" And so basically, I said like, "Hey, like I want to think of an idea, and I don't know what it is yet." And he wrote me a check for just under $500,000 and told me to go think of an idea. And I was trying to act so cool and calm, but like I was freaking out on the inside. And and I obviously said yes because that's a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Yeah.
And you think you're going to jump from joy, but you very quickly became one of the hardest times of my life. And I know that sounds like very you know, a time of privilege, but it was. I knew this was a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I didn't want to mess that up. And there's not a way to think of a fantastic idea, right? Like there isn't a way to do that. And it was also the first time in my life where I didn't have any constraints, right? And I think most of our life we have those constraints. And so I was thinking about how big the market is and what needs I have, needs of other people. And somebody gave me a great piece of advice. She said, choose something that even if it fails, you are going to be proud of it.
Hmm.
That was an amazing constraint for me. And I immediately started thinking about my grandmother who helped raise me. And I remember going to her house in second grade and after school, and I was complaining about all the math homework I had, which obviously I didn't have a lot because I'm in second grade. And my grandma, I remember I'm sitting down, walking in her house, and eating a little snack, and she tells me that she has a story she wants to tell me. And Jacob, I remember like that's the last thing I wanted to hear, right? Like a second grader, last thing you want to hear is a story from your grandparents. And my grandma tells me the story when she was 16. She was living in in Krakow, Poland. Her and her mom went on a family vacation. Dad's going to join. He stays home a couple extra days to finish some work. While they're on vacation, the Nazis invaded.
Hmm.
They killed her father, took everything, and she flees to New York City. Only job her and her mom can get is on a factory floor. They're working side by side, and my grandma decides she wants to become a doctor. Applies to every medical school in the state of New York, gets a no from every single one, keeps working in the factory. She applies again next year, every single medical school in the state of New York, gets a no from every single one, keeps working in the factory. She starts calling the deans of admissions and asking, why am I not getting in? And they all hang up on her, except for one guy who says, I'll be honest with you. You have 3 strikes against you. You're a woman, you are a foreigner, and you're Jewish. And hangs up.
Hmm.
She keeps working in the factory, applies again next year to every medical school in the state of New York. And one says yes, and she becomes a doctor. And I remember staring at her, Jacob, because this is very intense things to get from just having complained about math homework. And my grandma tells me, hey, David, the point I'm trying to make to you is education is the only thing that someone can't take away from you.
Hmm.
I realized if I got one chance, I want to try to make it possible. I want to build something that other people can't take away from others. And then the idea was kind of born, can I make it possible for anybody in the world to learn from the best?
Hmm. I love that story. It's very similar to my grandparents and my parents too. They also Jewish. They lived in the former USSR, the Republic of Georgia. They too had to flee there. Everything was taken from them. They weren't able to get jobs. They didn't speak English. So it's very, very similar type of story. Worked in factories.
Yeah, and then what happened? Yeah.
Well, so they went from the Republic of Georgia, they went to Italy, and it's funny, in Italy is where my parents actually met, even though they both lived in the Republic of Georgia at the time, a few blocks away from each other, but they never knew each other.
Wow.
So, thousands of miles away is where they actually met. From there, they migrated to Australia, which is where I was born. And then in Australia. My grandfather, he was a musician, so eventually he became a cellist for the Australian symphony there, but he drove a cab for a while. My grandmother and great grandmother, they worked in a chocolate factory. They cleaned floors, they cleaned bathrooms, they worked as janitors. And then it took many, many years, until they were able to establish themselves. But, decades later, my grandmother ended up retiring, teaching at the Naval Academy. She was teaching naval officers there, Russian. My grandfather passed away a couple of years ago, but he was a cellist. And so it's similar story of, Nazis. My great grandmother, she had her mom, hung in front of her in her house, like just in the front yard, like it was nothing. So it's terrible, terrible stuff that has happened. And you hear some of those stories, and you can't believe it. Puts everything into perspective. I think when you complain about problems today, like if I'm having a bad day, if something doesn't go well, you just remember some of the stories that you hear from your parents and grandparents, and you're like, what the hell? Like, you have food, you have shelter, no one's coming after you with a gun trying to kill you because of what you believe in. So, it's, yeah, terrible, terrible, crazy stuff that's happened in the world. But I mean, it certainly propelled me and motivated me to do things. I mean, it sounds like it helped you come up with this idea for MasterClass. And it's funny, I talked to a lot of people who have come from immigrant families, and I think a lot of you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but to me, it seems like when you have that immigrant mindset, you're programmed a little bit differently. The way that you think about challenges and obstacles and opportunities, the way that you can channel that and turn it into something for positive change. Like, it's just you're scrappier in a way. And I don't know what it is, but a lot of people that I've had on this show, CEOs who've come from immigrant families, whether they've come from slums of India or being in abject poverty in the United States, where their parents were immigrants, they just have these really fascinating stories about how they were able to transform their lives. And yeah, it's people who are able to use, I think, tragedy and difficulty and turn that into fuel for success is always fascinating. So I love that allowed you so came up with the idea for MasterClass for you, or were you just
I'd
originally
still
thinking
make
of
the trade that there was less.
Huh?
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. I was saying I would still make that trade that there is less pain in the
Yeah.
that there's less
Yeah.
pain in the
Of
world.
course.
Right?
Of course. Definitely.
Yeah.
So how did that then lead to MasterClass? So you had this idea, you wanted to focus on education.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
And it seems like you were given $500,000 without even an idea. So somebody invested in you for you as a person instead of you with an idea, which I also find very interesting. And so what did you do then? How did you move from getting that investment to actually building a product? Did you know you were always going to have celebrities on here? Did you have a different iteration of the product before it became what it is?
Yeah. So I mean, I posted ads on Craigslist, and I did it in small farm towns up down the state of California, and offered to pay people just to talk about their education, because I wanted to.
Interesting.
Yeah, I really believe in trying to understand the consumer need, and so and get outside of just I think it's great to build a product that you want and need, but you actually got to make sure that other people want and need it too.
Yeah.
And so I did that. I thought long and hard about why I love to learn, but I don't like taking online classes. Ran lots of polls. I mocked stuff up and put it in front of people and got the responses for it. And you know, and 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 then it slowly started iterating into MasterClass. I think people always want like the eureka the moment to come up, but I think it was actually a combination of things that built over time.
Hmm. Who was the very first person that created a course for you?
The first person who we recorded was James Patterson, the author, the best-selling author in the country, and I mean it was literally from cold emails. Yeah.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
I'm really curious in that evolution of how you were able to bring in these types of people. And I think it's very relevant for people, whether they're doing sales, whether they're being told no, because here you are, right? I mean, it's this young guy. You're going up to some of the most famous people in the world, and you're saying, look, I don't have an audience. I don't really have a fully completed product. I know you're one of the most famous authors in the United
I've never
States,
filmed
perhaps.
anything before.
You've
I've never
never filmed
started or
anything.
filmed anything. Yeah.
Can you please do a course for me? What did you say to James to get him to say yes?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think first of all, there were tons of no's, so I don't think I did a very good job at first. Um, there, I think there's a couple things. One is you got to figure out what that person really cares about, right? And for James, and our first three were James, Serena Williams, and Dustin Hoffman were our first three. And you
That's
got to
crazy.
figure
But
out.
these are like some of the most famous people in the world.
I mean, you have to figure out what things. The first thing is you got to figure out what they care about.
Yeah.
So it's not money, right? And for these folks, they all had somebody in their life that had a big impact on them, right? A mentor, a teacher, and so they want to give back, and they would love to do it at some sort of scale, right? Instead of going to a class once a week and to get some students, they want to do it at scale. And so you got to figure out what's important to them. Two is you also got to figure out what would hold them back or what would they be scared of. And one big thing they would be scared of is that basically brand, right? That I would, and how we portray them and how we filmed them, it would look bad. It would have it'd be sleazy, right? All those things. And so you say, you got to tell them that's not what you're going to do, but you want to do more than that. You want to show them how you're thinking about it so they can see it. And also, how can you get folks around you that they will trust? So, for example, our first three classes were filmed by Bill Gutentag, who's won 2 Oscars, and Jay Roach, who's a fantastic filmmaker. Those were folks that if they didn't know on a personal level, they could watch their movies and films, and they're like, okay, well, if they're going to film it, we know at least it's going to look great, right? And so you start thinking, how can I really show them that I really care? But more
Interesting.
important than that, I think they all took a bet. I mean, right? I mean, that was a bet they all
Yeah.
took, and I'm extremely thankful for it. Yeah.
But so it also sounds like, and perhaps it's an interesting strategy, is you get people on board who the people know. I mean, for example, I found this, right? So I have a book that's coming out shortly called Leading with Vulnerability. And
Congratulations.
thank you. Thank you. So it's coming out in October. I interviewed 100 CEOs for that one and did a big survey of 14,000 employees. And the book before that was called The Future Leader. And again, I interviewed 140 CEOs for that one. And one of the questions that a lot of people ask me is, how did you get 100 CEOs or 140 CEOs on there? And at least one of the things that I have found to be effective is that, once you work with one, let's say because I give a lot of talks for organizations. So once I give a talk for an organization, if I get one endorsement, one quote, one CEO, one leader to say yes, it becomes that much easier than to get other leaders, because you can say, hey, look who else is involved. And so in your case, it sounds like when you were reaching out to these people like Serena Williams and Dustin Hoffman, you had people who they knew, cinematographers or directors who they have either worked with or knew, and that kind of helped close the deal. So I think it's a very interesting strategy in the business world, whether you're trying to close a deal, whether you're trying to build alliances or relationships at work, whether you're trying to get a promotion. Kind of before you go in for the kill, so to speak, is you almost build a little bit of an alliance for yourself so that people know who else is on your side. And it seems like that was a pretty effective strategy for you to close at least some of these people.
Oh, 100%. I mean, 100%. And I think, if I was going to build off that, Jacob, I think you got to be strategic and smart about that alliance. It can't be an alliance for the sake of alliance. I think that people can smell that if it's not
Yeah.
if it's not, I have 1,000 advisors just attached. Like, why, right? Like, what? And like, they can't really be that involved, right?
Yeah.
So really thinking about the ones, and you want folks, especially in the beginning, who really believe in you or the project, right? Because they're going to want to speak to them and talk to them. And which are the ones that are strategically going to help you? So figure out where are the areas that you are weak that you want. So I had never filmed anything before. So how am I going to tell them that they're going to look great and it's going to be really great class if I've never made anything and there's nobody involved that is good at that, right? So like
Yeah.
you try to fill where you're weak, if you will.
Yeah, it's interesting. And today, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if you're allowed to share this or not, but I think the latest number I saw was the valuation of the company today is approaching 3 billion. Is that correct?
It's it is not something that we share.
Okay,
It's
that's
not something
okay. You could say you don't share it. I just Googling online, people put things online, but safe to say the company has become very, very successful over the years, which is fantastic. I'm curious also a little bit on any mistakes that you made along the way. So, for example, when you first starting MasterClass, and I think this is also relevant for a lot of current or aspiring leaders because you obviously created something that was not out there, right? I mean, you didn't have a model or a blueprint. Was YouTube? YouTube was around, right, when you started MasterClass?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was around, but I mean, not to the scale that
I'm
it's.
not that old,
Yeah,
Jacob. I'm not that old.
but not to the scale that it was now. And I don't think any of the learning platforms that a lot of organizations use were really out there. I mean, like there wasn't really a model that you were building this off of, was there? Was there something you were emulating that?
Oh, I think there were different parts of things, but
Pieces,
there
yeah.
wasn't something. Yeah, there are pieces. So you try to look at the pieces that you're impressed by or that work well, right? Um, you know, just a couple years ago, before we launched, I think Netflix had produced its first original content, right? At a super high production,
Oh yeah.
on super high quality production quality, right? And you were start to see that on the streaming side. On YouTube was already exploding,
Yeah.
but there wasn't as much that was super high on the quality side. Now it's exponentially better. Um, so yeah, but it was definitely there were parts that I was inspired by,
Mm.
but yeah, no, there wasn't something that was exactly what we were doing. But you asked me things learned or mistakes I made. I mean, a tremendous amount. I think on the council of advisors that you're kind of talking about, or the council, one of the mistakes I made was I had way too many of them.
Interesting.
And so as a result, I would ask lots of people for advice. And because you think, hey, look, I don't know all the answers, but if I get a bunch of smart people, just ask them, they're going to know all the answers.
Yep.
And you realize like that's horrible. Because if you ask like 10 smart people for their opinion, first of all, it's going to take you a long time to actually get their opinion, and then decide what to do. But you're like 10 smart people and they have multiple opinions and thoughts, and all of a sudden you're getting like a roundabout like way. And I relied way too much on that. And I realized I need to pick one or two and get really close to them for the stage, and then every stage you can evolve that. But that was one big mistake I made.
Remember, my brand new book, Leading with Vulnerability, is coming out October 3rd. Here is what the former CEO of the Home Depot said about the book. This book is a game changer for current and aspiring leaders. Jacob provides readers with a treasure trove of insights on how to connect with team members, unlock potential, and drive business performance. I wish I had this book when I was entering the business world. Again, this is from the former CEO of the Home Depot, Frank Blake. How can you be vulnerable at work without being perceived as being weak?
When you're a CEO addressing a large organization, you definitely have to be thinking about what you're communicating, how it will be interpreted. From a relatability perspective, are people going to understand the message?
The idea of being vulnerable and open and transparent is a fundamental component of how you're good at doing the job that I have. You should have the confidence to do what you're doing.
Let me follow up on that because I think that's really interesting, actually. To your point, I think a lot of people, whether you are leading a company or whether you're leading a team or whether you're just an employee at a company, I think the impulse and the gut reaction is to try to your point, get as many advisors around you as possible. Surround yourself with as many smart people as possible. Go to everybody and ask them for their opinion and their feedback and questions. And it's almost like going to a bunch of contractors or doctors or, choose your field, where if you go to so many people, eventually you're going to start getting a lot of different responses and feedback from people. And so I love this approach of just surrounding yourself with a couple core people who you can trust. How did you determine who those people were? Like, you went from having a lot of quote unquote advisors or people you trusted to having just a few. So how did you weed them out? What did you look for in these people to kind of bring them into your inner circle?
Okay, I'll share what I wish I had done, because I think like I did the wrong way. I think, and I'm glad to share that. But like the lessons I learned from it, right?
Okay.
One is to fill gaps that you have, right, in your own knowledge or area, or and that you maybe want externally or even just for yourself, like you need to show.
Okay.
So that was one. Two is, I think you want people who are a couple stages ahead of you. Sorry, I stutter. Couple stages ahead of you. So I think that's true for job mentorship. I think that's for entrepreneurship, for business, whatever. If they're way too many stages ahead of you, the advice they're going to give you is not going to be like on the tactical things that you're trying to deal with on an everyday basis, right? So you want a couple stages, so the person has seen it already a couple times. They've already made a bunch of mistakes on there, and but they can still recall it and it's fresh in their mind. Mm-hmm. The other part, I think, is how you use advisors, because so what I've learned is like, I actually don't. What's most helpful for me isn't to call an advisor and ask them for advice on the topic. There's no way that advisor is going to know everything, all the details, all the nuance, and there's no way that they want you to explain it all to them. So what I have found most useful, so now I look for this in my advisors, is I want to hear like an extreme point of view. So like for a difficult decision, I want like two advisors with very different points of view. One can be, very aggressive, and one can be very safe and conservative, or whatever it is.
Okay.
Because what I'm actually asking them to do is to show me more of the board, if you will.
More of the chessboard. I like that analogy.
Yeah, like I want to see the board that's dark, I can't see it, or the moves I haven't thought of, like, because then I'll make the decision, but now I'm like, I didn't even know that was an option. Like, wow, okay, I need to think that through, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. So I guess in the case of, let's say you're a mid-level leader or an entry-level employee inside of an organization, and you're thinking of, should I ask for a promotion? I guess the smart thing would be to try to find two people with different opinions, somebody who would say, or not even different opinions on yes, you should get it, or no, you shouldn't, but maybe different approaches on how to ask for the promotion. Right? Maybe somebody might say, yeah, go in there, be aggressive, and just, tell them all these things that you've done and everything that you know. And somebody might say, well, why don't you go in there, talk about some of your accomplishments, but also talk about some of the things that you don't know, and be a little bit vulnerable, and talk about where your gaps are and how you're going to try to close those gaps if you get promoted. So having those different, those different points of view. And I guess if you're a leader, for example, and you're thinking of investing in a product, or, opening an office in a different location, you want to get people around you who will say, you should do this product, or you shouldn't do this product. I think the danger is when you surround yourself with people who they give you the same answers. And then you're kind of just stuck to that one square of the chessboard. And then you got to push them a little bit and say, give me something else.
Yeah. And I think I totally agree. And, in user research and insights, they often talk about the user you want to talk to is an extreme user. Mm-hmm. Like if you're trying to, when I was looking into different things in education, I mean, I'm trying to remember the exact questions I asked to screen people, but it was like, I wanted people with strong points of view, right? I wanted people to be like, I hate this thing, or I love this thing, or I got screwed by this thing. Like you want those points of view, because they are deeper in it, they're passionate about it. And so the same way when you want advice, to your point, you want somebody to be like, you go in that and you go to your boss and you tell them, or her, you tell her, I need this, I deserve it. And somebody else would be
kick down the damn door and go in there guns blazing.
Yeah, and you want somebody else to be like, I never asked for promotion. That's the worst thing to do. Yeah. You wait till whatever, like you want those extreme points of view.
So you said you were going to talk about the mistake that you made. So you wish you would have done it that way, but what did you do instead?
Oh yeah, so the mistakes I made. I had way too many of them.
What's too many? Like 3, 4, 5?
Oh, at that early stage, oh no, I probably had like 20.
Wow. And these are all
Yeah,
smart people.
all exceptional people,
Yeah.
but I mean, I could spend all day, every day talking to them and getting their thoughts and opinions, right? And like, I have to pick two of them, right? Is what I learned I should have done, right? But like, I wasted time doing that. Um, Other thing,
So how did you pick the
yeah,
two? I don't know if you're able to share any names if
yeah,
you're comfortable doing that. If not, totally fine. I get it. But how
yeah.
did you go from 20 to 2? Because that to me is interesting, right? You're surrounded by 20 smart people, capable, very successful, probably some CEOs, some academics, like all at the top of their game,
Yeah.
and you got to pick 2. It's kind of like, if you have an all-star team, you're a basketball coach and you have an all-star team, 10, 11 players, everyone is amazing, and you got to pick 5 people to start, but they're all like LeBron James. How do you pick the 5?
I think you recognize that at different phases, what you need is going to be different. And some people are going to help you at different stages and different things, right? And so at this, early on, one of the people I gravitated towards an advisor, he eventually became our COO, is Mark Williamson, who was a very successful entrepreneur in his own right, and then we convinced him to come join us. But I realized I was trying to call Mark every day because his advice was really helpful and practical, and he didn't think like I did, right? So I was seeing it. So you just naturally started to do that. And I mentioned Jay Roach, the film director. I realized like he was able to see things I couldn't, and so I think actually like just if you take a step back, you're gonna see the ones that naturally feel right to you.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. So I think that's very valuable advice as far as who you surround yourself with. What about as far as you building the product? And so kind of the analogy that I'm trying to draw is there are a lot of leaders out there who have ideas, right? They're trying to figure out, should I invest in this product? Should I invest in this service? How do I know? As you were trying to kind of move in a certain direction with MasterClass, were there some missteps that you made, like huge failures besides the advisors, like that just, almost capsized the ship, so to speak? And how did you pick the direction that you wanted to go with? Because you're surrounded by a lot of people. I'm sure you got a lot of different suggestions. Do this, do that, go this way, go that way. How did you pick the path?
I think you use gut when you don't have data to help you. And so, I mean, I'll tell you something. This is in the past couple years, even, right? Because like entrepreneurship isn't like you do it once and you're done. Like every day, you're still on the journey. The business in my mind was always a consumer business.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple years ago, the folks at Pixar reached out and were interested in a enterprise package, right? And enterprise package. What? Huh? Right? And you're like, I don't know. I always thought it was also a consumer business, but you're like, okay, there's 1 or 2 people on the team who are interested in this. If you can go sell some enterprise, let's see if anything happens, right? And like my gut was like, not like that's not our business, right? Because I was focused 110% on the consumer business, right? Still have a lot to do there, but you're like, I mean, that's a cheap way to get data on it. And so the team did it, and they started closing lots of enterprise deals. And then you see that you're like, okay, well, my gut wasn't there, but I'm now looking at the data, and you're like, wow, this enterprise business is good. It has lots of potential.
Yeah.
And so the past couple of years, we've invested a lot in enterprise, and now we have half of the Fortune 100 as our customers. So this is
Wow.
MasterClass for their employees, right? But that was one where not you're not going to have every gut intuition right. So you also have you have to know when you're wrong.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. So MasterClass for Business, I'm guessing it's a similar idea to the consumer product, but probably teaching like leadership, customer experience, like just a variety of those types of themes, but aimed at the employees.
Yeah, I mean so it's all a MasterClass plus what we saw and what the need is that their on the soft skill side, on the power skills, I think we have actually underinvested in them. That actually those things are incredibly important. In the world of AI, I'd argue the base technical skills are going to be much easier for everybody. So those soft skills is what makes you stand out. And in the pandemic, I think we've gotten worse at them.
Yeah.
We've gotten worse at empathy. We got worse at innovation. We got worse at
Oh,
influence.
I
So you have that.
totally agree. Totally. Hey, you know what? You need somebody to come talk about leadership and vulnerability. You let me know. We'll make that happen.
All right, and especially if that person has a book, that'd be a big
Book,
plus.
a nice camera, and lighting,
Yeah, yeah,
everything's ready to go.
yeah.
Uh, I want,
So I think we saw that, and then we also saw, to your point, on the leadership skills, right?
okay. So I want to transition a little bit. And I've seen a couple articles written about this. I think you've talked about this. You mentioned this during our conversation. And so you have a stutter. When I was younger, I was diagnosed with ADHD. And I feel like a lot of, in today's world, there seems to be a lot of conversation around, challenges, overcoming challenges, turning that into a superpower. At least for me, one of the things that I have found, again, with ADHD, when I was younger, I was on Ritalin, until my parents realized like it's not a good thing to put your kids on. But it was the 80s, so what are you going to do? So at least for me, I have found that something like ADHD, I was able to channel into a little bit of a superpower, because while I was very distracted and while I was constantly not focused, there were some things that would really focus and keep my attention. And so a lot of people think ADHD are just kind of like bouncing all over the place, which is kind of true, but it also means that when you find something, you can really zone in on it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So for me,
Extreme focus.
yeah, you can get extreme, ridiculous levels of focus when you find something that you want to focus on. So for me, on the personal side, for example, I love to play a lot of chess, and I could literally sit and just play chess all day. Like if I had coffee and I had food, I could go for like 24 hours, just because it's something that it captures my attention and my focus. And there are some aspects of work that do that for me too. Like if I'm writing something, if I'm creating content, if I'm working on a book, if things of that nature, if I'm trying to get a new website launched, there are certain aspects of the business where if I'm engaged, I can just go until it's done. So for me at least, something like that has been able to be used as a superpower. Now I'm curious, in your case, with stuttering, how did that affect you? Because obviously you're the CEO of a company, communication is very, very important. Was that a challenge for you? How did you overcome it? Were you able to channel that into some sort of an asset, a positive element that allowed you to lead more effectively with your people?
It's good. Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, as a kid, it was worse. I was teased a lot in school about it. I think my parents did an amazing job of not letting that be an excuse for anything. So like my parents' expectation was when they had friends over for dinner that I would sit with them and their friends and I would like engage.
Yeah.
And like they would never. I actually remember my grandfather. I went to him. Who my grandfather was in. My grandfather was in Auschwitz in a concentration camp, and
Wow.
I remember going to my grandfather and telling him I was being teased at school because I stutter, and he gave me a hug and then kept walking. I was like, "Wait, what?" And he's like, "So." like so, so my family was never. I mean, they were very kind and obviously paid for any therapy I wanted or needed, and I did speech therapy. But I think for work, yeah, I mean, I probably messed up a couple pitch calls, instructor calls, because I stuttered a lot. I'm sure it turned some people off from joining the company or maybe from working with us, but.
It seems like it helped you become, at least from what I'm hearing, it seems like it helped you become resilient, because it wasn't like your parents or your family members pitied you. They said, you have a challenge and you still need to be out in the world. You're still going to sit at the dining table. You're not going to be a victim. You're still going to work hard and do the things that you do. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it built that level of grit and resilience and hard work that allowed you to kind of become as successful as you are.
Yeah, I think any challenge you have, helps there. I think it also made me very empathetic, I think, to other people, because I think not being able to express yourself is very difficult. And then being judged not on what you say, but on how you say it is also, is tough. And being underestimated for that. But I think the biggest probably journey is inside, because those people who decide not to work with us or whatever, like, screw them, right? Like, this
Yeah.
is who I am and this is what I have, and I'm working through it. And if you don't want to be part of that, that's fine.
Yeah. So you mentioned empathy. How does that come to life in the work that you do? Whether it's designing a product, whether, you mentioned that in relation to stuttering, how that helped you create empathy for other people. Why is that important? How does empathy play a role in what you do as a leader?
Empathy is not only the basis of our species, but it's like, I know it's gonna sound weird, it's the basis of business. I mean, you got to understand what people want, and if you can solve that, they're gonna trade you something for it. And in a creative field, and when we're working with our instructors and trying to get their craft and their mastery out of them, you know, you try as hard as you can to understand everything about them and how they think and how they process. And then our users, we try to understand what they actually want, right? What they actually need. And then employees and executives, the same thing. So I think it is very difficult to be, I think, successful in business without being good at empathizing.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, it's hard to lead without empathy, right?
Yeah, and the folks who do lead without it often still have those skills a little bit, right? Like they're still very good at understanding what somebody needs and wants. They might not care like about it, but the person's still good at getting into your shoes, Jacob, and being like, this, here are things that are important to him.
Okay. Let's jump to what I call the leader's toolkit. And this is the last 15, 20 minutes or so of the show, where we focus on specific action items that current or aspiring leaders might be able to apply in their leadership journey, in their professional development.
Let's do it.
And I thought of a couple of things that would be really interesting, at least for me. I mean, I'm, one of the reasons I have a podcast is because I'm genuinely interested in a lot of stuff. So I get a chance to ask questions that I'm curious about. And one of them is the difference between a prototype versus a final product. And, whether you're launching a physical product, a digital product, or a service, I think sometimes a lot of us feel like we can't launch something until it's perfect. I'm not going to create a course until it's perfect. I'm not going to release product XYZ until it's perfect. How do you balance the prototype with the product? What is that process like for you? I mean, I'm sure, for example, you're continuously thinking of new products, the future of MasterClass in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You probably have all sorts of crazy prototypes you're maybe thinking of or scheming on. How do you think of a prototype in relation to the product? My conversation with David Rogier continues only for subscribers at greatleadership.substack.com. And if you subscribe there, you're going to get a bonus episode every single week from one of my amazing guests, including this one from David. And in the bonus episode, we're going to talk about prototypes versus final products, balancing long-term growth and innovation with short-term results, unique practices that David has implemented inside of his organization. I don't want to spill the beans on all of them, but one of them is something called a right-handed and a left-handed question. And we talk about some other cool stuff in there as well. Only available if you subscribe at greatleadership.substack.com. These bonus episodes are called the Leader's Toolkit. You get one every single week, along with a video called the 5-Minute Leader, where I share a leadership hack, and a weekly in-depth guide that I personally write every single week, exploring a leadership topic, a theme, or a discovery. Again, all of this is at greatleadership.substack.com. I'll see you there.